It's been over a year since the HBO series Game of Thrones aired its season finale. With interest peaking about the prequel shows and George R.R. Martin's upcoming book, The Winds of Winter, what better time to explore the costumes of the prequel characters? So with that in mind, we are launching a 6-part series on the costumes of the prequel characters from Game of Thrones. To stir your imagination, we have sought out some amazing conceptual artwork from the world of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood, along with some stunning illustrations, fan art, and cosplays. You will find links to over 50 artist pages in the description below. To bring this series to light are co-producers Tatiana Melendez and Vanessa Amnesty. You will know Tatiana as one of the trio of my Game of Queens panel, along with some of her gorgeous costume designs that I have featured throughout the last few years. You'll see some of her work in this coming video series. And Vanessa has been a longtime viewer and is a Song of Ice and Fire book aficionado and costume lover. You can learn more about them in the description below. The information in this video comes from a variety of sources, including Elio and Linda's The World of Ice and Fire, The Untold History of Westeros and the Game of Thrones, which throughout the video I will refer to as the World Book. We also include George R.R. Martin's 2005 descriptions of the Targaryen kings and the Great Bastards, as described to artist Amok Amakov, whose artwork is featured in this video. While we strive for accuracy, we will occasionally get something wrong. Because we have so much content to share, this video will focus on the men's Prequel Targaryen costumes. You don't have to be a book reader to enjoy the ride, so let's get started. The World Book states that Valeria, also called Old Valeria, is a ruined city in Essos. It is a long-dead city of wonderment and was once the capital of a great empire called the Valyrian Freehold. It was destroyed by the cataclysmic event known as the Doom of Valeria, a century before Aegon's landing. A common racial characteristic among Valyrians appears to have been purple eyes and hair of silver gold or platinum white. Valeria is said to hold many treasures from before the Doom, such as Valyrian steel blades and items of magical power like glass candles. World Book states that the only family of dragon lords who survived the Doom of Valyria, the Targaryens, left the Valyrian Freehold 12 years before the Doom. The Targaryens were on Dragonstone for about 2 centuries after the Doom before invading Westeros when Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys began the first of the Wars of Conquest. The typical Targaryen features Valyrian attributes of pale skin, silver, platinum, or gold hair, and eyes in a variety of shades of purple or light blue, lilac, indigo, or violet eyes. The 3-headed dragon, red, on black, is the emblem of House Targaryen. It represents Aegon and his 2 sisters. Aegon the Conqueror. Aegon I Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Conqueror, was the first lord of the 7 kingdoms and king on the Iron Throne, having conquered 6 of the 7 kingdoms during the conquest. In his correspondence with Amok, George R.R. Martin described Aegon as the prototypical Targaryen, saying that he was tall, broad-shouldered, and powerful in appearance, with purple eyes and short-cut silver golden hair, no longer than the bottom of his ears. Aegon was reported to be very charismatic and commanding. During his conquest, he typically wore into battle a shirt of black scale mail, greaves or shin covers, gauntlets, a flowing cloak, and he wielded Blackfire, a bastard sword made of Valyrian steel. His crown was simple. It was a circlet of Valyrian steel set with big square-cut rubies. Aenys. Aenys is the son of Rhaenys and Aegon, and the eldest of 2 sons of Aegon, as tall as his father, but softer and slender. He was believed to be a bastard because Rhaenys was known to have lovers, and he was weak and sickly at birth. He was king after Aegon and had 5 children. In The Sons of the Dragon, Aenys is described as dressing in the finest silks, samites, a type of luxurious and heavy silk fabric often interwoven with gold or silver thread, and velvets. Aenys was a kind-hearted, courteous, charming, and soft-spoken man who wished to be loved by everyone and always sought to please. The World Book states that Aenys had a silky beard and a pointed mustache. He wore many jewels, and his golden crown was large and elaborate. George describes Aenys as dressed in velvet robes in the same lilac as his eyes, with cloth of gold lining and an ermine collar. Maegor the Cruel. According to the World Book, Maegor the Cruel was the son of Visenya and Aegon and was believed to be conceived with dark magic by Visenya. He was a tall, broad, and a fearsomely strong man, larger than his father Aegon I Targaryen was. He was bull-like, with heavy shoulders, a thick neck, and huge arms. Though he was on the heavy side, he was not fat, but more massive and square. He kept his hair short and his beard trimmed to his jawline. He had angry-looking, suspicious eyes and a scowling mouth. Aegon had 8 or 9 wives, all or most from other houses, some of whom he was married to at the same time. He executed a number of them for failing to provide him an heir, a test which all of them ultimately failed. George describes Maegor's armor as more elaborate than Aegon's, and instead of a shirt of scale, he wears a breastplate covered by a surcoat, a loose robe worn over armor that displays the Targaryen 3-headed dragon red on black. He looks as though he just came from battle, and his armor and cloak show dints, tears, and bloodstains. He wears Aegon the Conqueror's steel and ruby crown. Jaehaerys Targaryen. Also known as the Conciliator, the Wise, or later in life as the Old King, Jaehaerys was the 4th Targaryen king to sit on the Iron Throne and reigned for 55 years. He had the purple eyes of House Targaryen. At the age of 16, he wore his hair loose, flowing about his shoulders. It says in the World Book that, early in his reign, King Jaehaerys grew a wispy beard and mustache. By the time he had turned 24, Jaehaerys looked every inch a king. He was a tall and handsome man who wore his hair in a thick braid that fell almost to his waist, and his facial hair had grown out into a handsome full golden beard, shot through with silver. Later in his reign, and despite his years, George describes the old king as still unstooped, but his face and hands are wrinkled, and his long white beard reaches to his waist. Dressed in flowing robes of black and gold, his crown is a simple gold band set with 7 gemstones of different colors. King Viserys I. Viserys I Targaryen was the 5th Targaryen king to sit on the Iron Throne. Viserys was plump and pleasant, sported a bushy, silver-gold mustache, and wore the crown with the 7 stones of his grandfather, Jaehaerys I. He was a peaceful man who hated conflict and was described as amiable, open-handed, and eager to please. Though Viserys was never considered strong-willed, he was not pliable or indecisive either. When he made a choice, he was unwavering and firmly stood by his decision. George describes Viserys as a plump and pleasant king, raised during a time of peace and plenty, and clad in silk brocade and dark purple. As a side note, towards the end of his life, his girth nearly kept him from ascending the steps to the Iron Throne. Daemon Targaryen. Prince Daemon Targaryen was the uncle and husband of Prince Rhaenyra Targaryen, whose claim to the Iron Throne he supported in the Dance of Dragons. According to the World Book, Daemon was a skilled warrior described in the histories as a triple D of dashing, daring, and dangerous. He was also ambitious, impetuous, mercurial, amoral, reckless, and quick to take offense. Prince Daemon was the most experienced warrior of his time and wielded the Valyrian steel longsword Dark Sister, one of two ancestral swords of House Targaryen. George wrote on his Not a Blog that Prince Daemon was a rogue if there ever was one. Aegon II. Aegon II Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Elder, was the sixth Targaryen king to sit on the Iron Throne. The World Book states that Aegon II resembled his father strongly, but his manner was petulant rather than pleasant. Aegon II acted the warrior, but it didn't suit him. According to George, he is clad in armor, but he does not look like a warrior. No beard and only a faint wispy hint of a mustache. Aegon II wears the steel and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror and carried his namesake's Valyrian steel sword Blackfire. Aegon took a three-headed golden dragon for his personal sigil instead of the red three-headed Targaryen dragon. Aegon III. Aegon III Targaryen the Dragonbane was the seventh Targaryen king to sit on the Iron Throne. According to the World Book, Aegon dressed simply and in black, always according to Maester Yandel, even his gloves. And according to custom, clothes for mourning are always black. Under his velvets and satin, he would wear a hair shirt. In medieval times, hair shirts were typically made of the hair of a mountain goat or camels and worn to mortify the flesh or as penance. He wore a short beard but no mustache and a circlet of yellow gold with no ornament, which according to Fire and Blood was simple and unadorned. George says that he always wears a livery collar of a three-headed dragon on a golden chain around his neck. Daeron I. Daeron I Targaryen, also known as the Young Dragon, was the eighth Targaryen king to sit on the Iron Throne. A warrior and conqueror, Daeron was self-confident and charismatic. According to George, young Daeron was very handsome, being clean-shaven with long hair. He wore the crown of Aegon the Conqueror, the steel and rubies, and owned an elaborate suit of gold and black plate. Baelor the Blessed. Baelor I Targaryen, also known as Baelor the Beloved and Baelor the Blessed, was the ninth Targaryen king to reign on the Iron Throne. George describes Baelor dressed in a septon's white robes tied off with a rope belt. He is very thin, from repeated fasts, and very frail-looking. His long hair and beard remind one of Jesus, too, although Baelor's are the typical Targaryen silver gold color. He wears a crown of flowers and vines. Aegon IV. Aegon IV Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Unworthy, was the 11th Targaryen king to sit on the Iron Throne and is considered to be one of the worst Targaryen kings. According to the World Book, Aegon the Unworthy began his reign young and handsome, but at its end he was old and corrupt, his body bloated and fat. His legs could not support his weight, and his eyes and mouth were small and mean. He ornamented and dressed himself richly, and unsuccessfully tried to hide his double chins with a big beard. The World Book also says that Aegon IV had as many as 9 mistresses and many bastards. Supposedly, he had any woman he wanted, whether they were married or not. George describes Aegon IV as the Henry VIII of Westeros. His clothing silk and satin, bright and rich, and he would have lots of gold and gemstones about him, a chain, rings, etc. His crown is a new one, huge and heavy, red gold, each of its points a dragon's head with gemstone eyes. Aegon IV legitimized all his bastards, according to the World Book, both the great bastards gotten on noble mothers and the baseborn on his deathbed, and the pain, grief, war, and murder that wrought lasted 5 generations because of the Blackfyre pretenders. Of the 3 male bastards, George says that Daemon and Bittersteel should be both taller and more imposing than Bloodraven, the scrawny one of the lot. Aegor Rivers, otherwise known as Bittersteel. George says that Bittersteel was younger than Daemon Blackfyre and older than Bloodraven. Bittersteel was also a warrior and looked the part. He was only half Targaryen, so he got the purple eyes, but his hair was black. As an adult, he wore a beard, cropped very short, little more than a shadow on his face and jaws. He is tall and well-made, but lean and lithe as a panther. According to George, Bittersteel's plate armor is well made but plain, no-nonsense gray steel and black ring mail. His helmet bears a horsehead crest with a horse's mane flowing down behind. His shield has a winged red stallion on a golden field. Only the horse has a big black dragon wings instead of the usual Pegasus-style feathered angel wings, and he's snorting fire. Bloodraven. Sir Brynden Rivers, called Lord Bloodraven, was the bastard son of King Aegon IV Targaryen by his 6th mistress, Lady Melissa Blackwood. George says that Brynden Rivers is an albino with milk-white skin and white hair worn long. His eye is red, the one he still has. At the Battle of the Redgrass Field, his left eye was put out by Bittersteel when they dueled. He seldom wears an eye patch, but prefers to display his scar and empty socket to the world. His sigil is a one-headed white dragon with red eyes. Bloodraven is a shade under 6 feet tall and very thin, gaunt, with a grim, unforbidding aspect and a sinister reputation as a sorcerer and spy master. Although he bears the Valyrian blade Dark Sister that once belonged to Aegon's Visenya, his favorite weapon is a tall bone white weirwood longbow. He is an expert bowman. His longbow is weirwood and should be white. His colors are scarlet and smoke, smoke being a sort of dark gray streaked and mottled with black. Because his skin is very sensitive to the rays of the sun, he frequently goes about cloaked and hooded. On the right side of his face, over his throat and extending up to his cheek, he has the red port wine stained birthmark from which he gets his name. The birthmark is said to look somewhat like a raven drawn in blood. However, the likeness is hardly exact. Dunk thinks the birthmark was just a splot. It is more a suggestion of a raven shape like a Rorschach ink blot. Daemon I Blackfyre. Daemon I Blackfyre, born Daemon Waters, was the bastard son of Princess Daena Targaryen and King Aegon IV Targaryen. According to George's description, Daemon had all the hallmarks of his house: the silver gold hair, the deep purple eyes, fine features of an almost inhuman beauty. Daemon's friends and supporters often remarked on how much he resembled Aegon the Conqueror, or at least his likeness, since none of them had ever seen Aegon in the flesh. And indeed, there was a certain similarity, though Daemon wore his hair long, flowing down to his shoulders in a silvery gold mane. He went clean-shaven with neither beard nor mustache. Daemon looked every inch the warrior, broad shoulders, big arms, a flat stomach, but he was also a man of considerable charm. He made friends easily, and women were drawn to him as well. According to the World Book, Daemon Blackfyre reversed the colors of the Targaryen arms for his own banner, as many bastards did. Thus he became known as the Black Dragon. In the years following his rebellion, asking if someone had followed the Red Dragon or the Black was considered a dangerous question. His armor would be ornate and costly, all black and red plate, and his war helm was distinctive, with bat-like steel dragon wings on the sides. Daemon founded House Blackfyre, named after the Targaryen Valyrian steel sword. Blackfyre was the most famous Valyrian steel sword that the Targaryens possessed. Meleys the Monstrous Blackfyre. Better known as Meleys the Monstrous, Meleys the First Blackfyre was the last of the Blackfyre pretenders and the last known member of the male line of House Blackfyre. According to the World Book, he had a second head sprouting from his neck, like a parasitic twin, no bigger than a child's fist, and a grotesquely huge torso and arms. Meleys was inhumanly strong, able to kill a destrier, a medieval knight's warhorse, with a single punch. And because of his strength and savage nature, he could tear a man's head clean off his shoulders. Aegon V. Aegon V Targaryen was the 15th Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne as King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. A young Aegon Targaryen, nicknamed Egg, squired to the hedge knight Ser Duncan the Tall after the Trial of Seven. Aegon had large eyes which could appear dark blue, but were actually deep and dark and purple. The boy was pasty-faced and skinny. He shaved his hair to hide his identity while a squire, making his eyes appear huge on his bald head. Aegon wore a wide-brimmed floppy hat while squiring. Duncan observed Egg's hair shone like beaten gold with strands of silver woven. George describes the adult Aegon as handsome, strong yet somehow kindly and approachable. He is all slender, with a slight smile. He has large, thoughtful eyes in a very deep purple color, and his hair falling to his collar. He wears the simple crown of the dragonbane. Aerys II. Aerys II Targaryen, also called the Mad King, was the 17th and last member of the Targaryen dynasty to sit on the Iron Throne. Aerys cut himself so often on the Iron Throne that men took to calling him King Scab. It's written in A Feast of Crows that, later in his life, as his insanity grew, his appearance deteriorated, most notably after his captivity during the Defiance of Duskendale. According to the World Book, King Aerys II always had a little madness in him, it seems, but he was charming and generous as well, so his lapses were forgiven. His reign began with much promise, but as the years passed, the lapses grew more frequent. George says that the Mad King was only in his 40s when he died, but he looked much older. He was very thin because he was afraid of being poisoned, and gaunt, with wild, tangled hair past his shoulders and fingernails almost a foot long. He would not allow blades in his presence, even to cut his hair and trim his beard. He wears the big, elaborate crown of Aegon the Unworthy. Rhaegar Targaryen. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was the firstborn son of King Aerys II Targaryen and his sister wife Queen Rhaella, and heir apparent to the Iron Throne. According to the World Book, it was said that no man ever knew Prince Rhaegar. In Dany's chapters in A Storm of Swords, Prince Rhaegar is described as an intelligent young man who excelled at anything to which he put his mind to, and grew to be a great knight and a skilled musician. Men said Rhaegar loved his silver-stringed harp more than he loved his lance. In Cersei's chapter in A Feast of Crows, Rhaegar is described as beautiful with long, elegant fingers. She wonders, had any man ever been so beautiful? He was more than a man, though. His blood was the blood of old Valeria, the blood of dragons and gods. Rhaegar had deep purple or indigo-colored eyes. He was taller than his younger brother Viserys would be in his adulthood, with hair similar to the silver blonde of Viserys and their sister Daenerys. Rhaegar was formally betrothed to the Dornish princess Elia Martell, the younger sister of Doran Martell, Prince of Dorne. They married in a lavish ceremony which was held at the Great Sept of Baelor. Rhaegar and Elia had their first child, a girl named Rhaenys, and nearly died giving birth to a son named Aegon, after which the maester told Rhaegar she would be unable to have any more children. Rhaegar believed his child Aegon to be the prince that was promised. According to Eddard's chapter in Game of Thrones and Dany's chapter in A Storm of Swords, during the great tourney at Harrenhal, Rhaegar defeated his oldest friend, Sir Arthur Dayne. Taking the Winter Rose crown from the Queen of Love and Beauty, he revealed his interest in Lyanna Stark by passing over his wife, Princess Alia, and setting it in Lyanna's lap. Ned Stark later recalled that moment as when all the smiles died. The next year, Rhaegar seemingly kidnapped Lyanna for reasons unknown. This act ultimately triggered Robert's Rebellion, also known as the War of the Usurper, and the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty. Some believe that Rhaegar spent the beginning of Robert's Rebellion with Lyanna Stark at the Tower of Joy in the Red Mountains of Dorne. According to Eddard's chapters from Game of Thrones and Cersei's chapter in A Feast of Crows, Rhaegar owned night black plate armor with a three-headed dragon of House Targaryen decorated in rubies on his breastplate, and underneath the plate he wore golden ringmail. Rhaegar decorated his helm with gold, orange, and red silken streamers resembling flames. In Dany's chapter in Game of Thrones, during her fever dream, she sees her brother Rhaegar mounted on a stallion as black as his armor. Fire glimmers red through the narrow eye slit of his helm. When Daenerys lifts his polished black visor, the face within it is her own. Jorah Mormont tells Dany in A Storm of Swords that Rhaegar fought valiantly, Rhaegar fought nobly, Rhaegar fought honorably, and Rhaegar died. Dany has a vision of Rhaegar's death at the Ruby Ford of the Trident at the hands of Robert Baratheon. Rhaegar, despite wounding Robert, was struck down with a massive blow from Robert's warhammer, which scattered the rubies encrusted in Rhaegar's armor into the water. While Rhaegar lay dead in the stream, soldiers of both armies scrambled in the water to search for the rubies. In Dany's vision of the House of the Undying in A Clash of Kings, rubies flew like drops of blood from the chest of a dying prince, and he sank to his knees in the water and with his last breath murmured a woman's name. The location was named the Ruby Ford thereafter. In A Feast of Crows, Brienne of Tarth is later informed that 6 rubies from the Battle of the Trident have washed up nearby. Thank you to my co-producers Tatiana and Vanessa, and to all of the talented artists that helped make this video possible. Just as a reminder, I have links to all of their artist pages in the description below. In the next episode, we'll look at the women's prequel Targaryen costumes. You don't want to miss that. And while you are waiting, you can check out my video on the Game of Thrones costumes you wish were in the show. Thank you for spending time with us. We'll see you in the next video.